this week have you spent trying to work out where that performance at Leicester?
Yeah, look, of course it was. It wasn't the performance that we all hoped for and expected. So yeah, look, it was a sore one, no doubt about that. We didn't perform anywhere near to the level that we, certainly from an out of possession point of view, that we felt we could have got to in terms of in relation to the games we had leading into that one. So yeah, we were disappointed, and we've had to look into it and lean into it. I think when it's not good, you need to accept it and lean into it and own it. And that's what we've had to do this week. And of course, the nature of professional football is lick your wounds and get ready for the next one.
After the positives they've been in the games leading up to it, have the players seen a different side to you this week? Have they seen a frustrated, angry Coach Rusk?
No, I was angry and I was upset, but so were they. After the game, it's not a time for division. So I think it's important that we remain united in what we're doing. And we were all disappointed, and we all have to own it together. I certainly don't think, when I inherited these 7 games as interim manager in quite a tough situation, I think one of the main things I said was we need to stick through this together in some hopefully good times and maybe some difficult times. And I think probably, in honesty, the evidence of the season was there was going to be 1 or 2 difficult times. I don't think there's anything unexpected around that. But of course, the nature of the game, we wanted to turn up there and get something out of the game and give a good account of ourselves. And on the day, for whatever reason, that didn't happen. So consistency is something I pride myself on, and trying to make sense of things and add meaning to it and move forward in the best way possible and put... I've got to help the players. I'm here to help the players, and I've got a position of responsibility in the short term for the football club to do my best in, what I've said aren't straightforward circumstances. So really it's a case of trying to get over the emotion of the day, trying to understand, what we could have done better, what we needed to do, what we have been doing and didn't do on the day. And maybe there's a bit of subconscious that played into the performance that, it's a game that maybe there's an expectation we need to get something from, and as is all games to a certain extent. But, there was a lot in the mix and there was a lot to unpick, and we've done it as professionally as we can, and we move forward now.
And you said on Saturday that this week in training there'd be shirts up for grabs, that perhaps there'd be changes this weekend. Is that still your intention, and have you seen the reaction to give you selection headaches?
Yeah, look, I think, it's, again, we will only maybe at times see the black and white version of the 90 plus minutes on the pitch. And, there's a lot of other work that goes into that week for us, the 2 hours on the grass, the days we're in training, the meetings, the analysis, all the work that goes into it, and respecting that you're playing against other, Premier League players and coaches and managers. And so, there's a whole host of work that goes on away, and with that, it's, when you get a bad result like that, there's a lot of work which feels undone. So really, it was a case of us saying, look, we've got to go and do the work again. And what we can't do in this situation is be victims or feel sorry for ourselves. We can't. So the message to the group was that we have to fight. We have to fight, and how you fight best as a footballer is not really through words, it's through actions. So, my message to the players was, look, all we can do is take care of our actions. Take care of our actions day to day. Do the right thing at the right time. What's the next right thing to do? What's the next right thing to do as a team? And within that, what's the next right thing to do as an individual? And as a result of that, of course, your performance in training will have some type of input into the team selection. Not always. There's sometimes a lot of different reasons as to why you arrive at a final starting 11. It could be intuition as a coach. It could be opposition. It could be someone has had a standout week in training. Someone's lacking a little bit of confidence. It's not a black and white format really. But what I did say to the players was, be at it. Be at it and give yourself the best chance of starting the next game.
You've seen what you were hoping for?
Yeah, definitely. And again, I fully understand that. There is different types of analysis. There'll be analysis internally, where we work with the players day to day and we're with them on this journey, which is, at times difficult at the minute. no doubt about that. So our view of the day is the black and white version of the 90 minutes is always going to be a little bit more measured than, you know, other people's perhaps. So as I've said from day dot, you know, coming up for 5 weeks in the role now, the players' attitudes has been good, you know, and the application's good and the work rate's good. You know, I think one of the issues is, and it's just as a whole, we fell short this year. You know, we have fell short, and whether that's the team, whether that's us as a football club competing at this level, an extraordinary, you know, level of competition every week. You know, we fell short, and on the day we fell short again, and all we can do now is work hard and try and put our best foot forward next week or Saturday.
How about injuries? Have you got any issues?
No, I mean we've trained quite vigorously today, so I'm still haven't had an update off, you know, who's in. But as we sit here now, you know, again, fairly clean bill of health.
I'll ask you specifically about that sort of question and the approach to that, because you and all the other managers, you're in a no-win situation because you don't want to mislead fans, but then you don't want to give anything away to the opposition, do you? So how do you approach that part of the role, I suppose? Yeah,
well, I guess really in some respects, this maybe, you know, it depends on where you're at, and if you have had a string of 5 or 6 really positive results and the team is generally picking itself, you know, it's probably easier to analyse, you know, no matter what a manager says in a press conference, what the next pick going to be. But, you know, every manager, my experience of football is every manager will work differently. I've worked with managers, you know, at first team level in the Premier League that won't name their team till Saturday morning, literally. You know, they'll want to chew the fat Thursday night, they'll want to look at Friday's training session, they'll want to analyse the opponent one last time, and then they'll make their decision on the day of the game. I've seen that. I've seen some managers that announce their team on Tuesday going into a Saturday game, and everyone's got. So there's no right or wrong. There's no formula for how you do this. And you know, for me, maybe at the minute it's, you know, we're doing our work. We're seeing, you know, what we think is going to be useful. We're using as many of the training sessions we can. You know, for me to, as a head coach with these players, learn about them as much as possible based upon the next game coming up. So, of course, you know, I'm not going to walk into these press conferences and do anything which I don't think aids our performance. And sometimes that is, you know, information. But genuinely, sometimes you just, as you finish your training session 45 minutes ago, there might be 1 or 2 things that you're still thinking about, that you're still waiting for a bit of feedback from a physio about how someone is, how someone wakes up Friday morning, how someone wakes up Saturday morning. You know, so it's not as straightforward. You know, there are complexities and things that sometimes require, you know, a bit of skullduggery in terms of what information you keep back, but also a bit more time to assess and think.
You know, I'm asking obviously because of the Matty Fernandez scenario last weekend.
Yeah.
In a wider thing, is there ever any benefit in sitting there and telling us a player got injured 2 days ago?
Yeah, I think back to the Mourinho press conference of that one where he went and named the team. So, look, is there any benefit? No, but sometimes, you know, it's not, as we sit here today, it's not clear cut on what the outcome is, and there are complexities. So if for Matty's case, the week before, leading up to the Fulham game, Matty had a chest infection. So cumulatively, he's a young player. In his specific case, the type of process that would take place around that is us looking at the data, looking at how many minutes a young player's played this year, the intensity of the games, what a specific position will require from a physicality point of view, where someone is cognitively. You know, there's huge concentration levels to play in a Premier League match. So, you know, these are all things that might sound a bit pompous, but they're all things that in elite sport, you know, and we are working at the very top of the game here in elite sport that matter, you know, protecting people from injury. You know, if someone's fatigued and they're tired and they're, you know, they're mentally, you know, coming to their limits, you become a big injury risk. So these are all things that are in the mix that any manager would tell you, that when you're, you know, I don't get to stop the game and come on the tannoy and explain, you know, all of these, start talking about data, and sometimes it is intuition, you know, but there is far more that goes into making these decisions that perhaps meet the eye. And when you make these decisions, you know, you are on the sideline genuinely making the decision that you think is best for the team, best for the player.
This opposition, Man City next, what are you expecting from them this weekend?
Yeah, I think you know, obviously what we're facing is one of the greatest teams and the greatest manager that have been around for, you know, 9-10 years now minimum in and around it. So they have by their standards, I guess they'll be disappointed that they've not competed for the league title to the later stages. But when you analyse them as a coach and you look at the qualities they possess and the manager's abilities, an icon for me, someone who absolutely look up to. You're going to be tested to your maximums. The players are going to be tested. I'm going to be tested. As a football club, we're tested. So what we have to do is be prepared and be diligent and prepare our game, to really try and as much as we can counteract their qualities. But that's something that we can look forward to. I think it's important that we don't move into fear territory around these games. That we are focused and we look forward to it, and we put our best foot forward. That's all we can do.
From your point of view, is there time these days, the traditional sort of glass of wine between managers after a game? Do you where you are on your journey, do you get an opportunity to tap into Pep's brain and things after the game at all? Anything like that?
Yeah, I think on your travels you do get, passing conversations, and I think the nature of the job now after the game is there's that much media commitment sometimes that there's not time. Logistically there's not time. It is nice to speak to other colleagues and people who have got experiences which, are from my perspective, absolutely amazing and fantastic, and insights and a bit of help sometimes as well, asking people, how did you manage this? How did you feel about that? Something I've always looked to do. So of course, but mindful of the commitments of the modern day manager working in the Premier League, and but if you do get them opportunities to speak, I think they're nice opportunities.
Just finally, the game at the Etihad earlier this season, very obviously different manager, different style, but Saints gave City a good run up there. Do you look at that game? Is there anything you can take from that going into this one?
Yeah, again, look, I think very different time of the season, very different context. I think context is key in anything in life. I think, but of course, success leaves clues. So there'll be aspects of it without the ball that I thought were really good. I travelled to the game on the day and watched it with my own eyes. So it will absolutely be part of our analysis, but be part of their analysis too, I'm sure. So there's that balance. We're 6 months in advance of where it was, different stage of the season. Different thoughts, different feelings, different energies. City probably a little bit further down the line in terms of injuries that have cleared up and back to them now. So again, all of these things have to be taken into consideration. But yeah, for sure, part of the analysis.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
Just on that opposition, Simon, my only question really on it is probably not the best time to come up against Manchester City. They've been on a bit of a resurgence arc, you might say. So how do you go about sort of approaching a team which, are on a really good run of form at the moment?
Yeah, I think I've spoke a lot about, sticking to, great basics. I think when you are playing against, some of the best players in the world and some of the best teams in Europe and maybe further afield, that you've got to try and get your basics right. Brilliant basics, world-class basics, and grow into these games and be in these games. So really, for me, that's a fundamental of anything we try and do. That if you've got to make sure that the basics and the fundamentals of the roles within the team are understood and can be executed. And as much as you can, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of things to break down. But I think clarity and simplicity is helpful in these games. And that's something that we try and give the players. And belief. You've got to have a belief in what you're doing. We've got to go there and believe that we can find a way to get something out of the game. We're at home. We are playing for huge amounts of pride. But what we have to find is the balance. We've got to find the balance tactically, and we have to find the balance in terms of dealing with our opposition. And as I said, we know what they possess. Everyone knows what they possess. But yeah, for me, making sure that we are looking after world-class basics.
You described Pep as a bit of an icon earlier. What do you idolise about him as a manager, and do you sort of aspire to have similar managerial aspects?
Again, I love football, and I love all different types of football. I like, people's philosophy. People speak a lot about philosophies now, and I probably more look at the person. I think the ability for people to consistently turn up in good and bad times and absorb the pressures that come with the job, and the energies and dealing with, you know, lots of players and all their ambitions and feelings, and dealing with the media and dealing with the intensity of the role. So I look at these guys that have done it year in, year out for a long time, and you know, they find their energy, and I'm in awe of that. You know, I think it's remarkable, really. And again, you know, and then on top of that, you know, these managers that will have their way of playing is, you know, everyone's different. Everyone's got different principles. Everyone views the game of football slightly differently, and that's amazing. And I think, you know, I value open-mindedness with the game. I think the game needs lots of different styles. But in terms of Pep in particular, and, you know, that he's a name which everyone knows and everyone looks up to, I think his ability to turn up, you know, and endure the successes and endure the good times with, you know, with the personality and with integrity as a manager, I really admire that.
You talk about enduring the bad times. You've reached just over half your spell as interim manager at the moment. You've had to deal with some not so nice results. How do you sort of go about, I don't know, reflecting on your time so far as a manager in the Premier League?
Yeah, for me, like, there was always going to be some not good results. You know, I think what I felt was sensible was to what can you influence? And for me, you can influence environment. You know, you can influence attitude. You can influence organisation, and there'll be other things as well. But really, you know, I think when you inherit a team with 7 games to go that are bottom of the league, you know, I think it would be an element of this. You know, it would be wrong to suggest that we are going to go and win 7 games or 5 games. There was going to be some difficult times within these 7 games. I think what we aspired to do was, you know, create a good environment for the players to perform in, to be a difficult team to beat. And I've assessed that. I think the last 4 games we've gone from conceding analytically, and the data would suggest that we've gone from conceding 3 big chances to just over 1.5. So that's a massive gain. You know, we've worked hard to do that as a coach and my coaching team and the players, that we felt that, you know, we needed to address that. You know, and as I alluded to last week, that you know, we was never, if we were going to be all things in all areas of the game, we would probably be competing for the Champions League slots. So we knew that the players were struggling to concede, keep the back line tight, and keep the chances that we were conceding down to a minimum. So we wanted to influence that, and we've done that really well. And the data would suggest that. And, you know, we should have potentially had a win at West Ham. We were very close to getting a very good point against Fulham. We were 0-0 for large parts of the game against a very good Aston Villa team. And last Saturday we had a bad day. You know, last Saturday we had a bad day, and we all concede that. But if you actually look as a whole, you know, I'm really confident and pleased with the environment and the way we're working every day. And you know, our demands we're putting on the players are professional and right and healthy. But I think as a team, I aspire to make us harder to beat. You know, and we've done that. We've done that well. And I think on Saturday, we maybe moved away from what we had been going into these games for whatever reason that we all have to own. But I think overall, you know, with 3 games to go, you know, as much as we were disappointed last week, I do believe we have, you know, there's a lot that we can be pleased with too.
And that's, I know you probably don't want to dwell on that Leicester defeat too much, but how have you gone about this last week, sort of picking the squad back up, who are probably already quite low on confidence?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a saying, isn't there? It's never what happens to you in life, it's what meaning you attach to it. So for us, what meaning could we attach to the result? Because at the start it's raw, you know, and we're all sort of hurt, you know, not sort of hurt, we are hurt, we're hurting. And I really spoke about unity at the first, you know, point we got back together this week, that, you know, what we can't do now is divide, you know, and we need unity. We need unity in the stadium, you know, we need unity as a group of footballers, we need unity as a training ground. And I said, encourage the players just to make sure we think about how we stick together. You know, it is almost, you know, it's easy now for people when the going gets tough and you're in periods of adversity to look after number one. So I'm asking people to put the team first, you know, and as a result, I think people will still come with us and will still see that, yeah, we're having a hard time this season. I can't dress that up any different. It's been a hard season and we fell short at the level. But what we can do is, add the meaning we need to add to it. We've got to keep fighting, So for me, the message was about, look, let's stay together, stick together. We've had a bad day, but the work and the data leading into that game was suggesting that we were making progress in areas we wanted to make progress. And it's a short space of time. So unity, we can't be victims, we need to be fighters. And what we have to do, though, is also make sure that, knowledge can dispel fear. So to make sure that we're trying to get our game plan right as best we can against top opposition. And again, sometimes you have to, if you get all them things right, it might be where the universe takes you,
Yeah, and it is all about pride now for these last 3 games, pretty much, because you've got two at home in front of a crowd who haven't had much to cheer about so far this season.
Yeah.
So do you think the players have got enough sort of mental and physical strength, to get through that and end the season on a high?
Yeah, again, we want to finish the season on the high, and we're going to do everything we can to, I'm not sure because of the season anything's going to be finished on a high, but I think we can finish with spirit and self-esteem and really build momentum. What do we want to be as a football club, moving forward, and whatever the identity is moving forwards. I think any good team has pride, has work rate, has endeavour, has commitment, makes mistakes. There are mistakes. Football is often about mistakes. It's normally, I think 9 times out of 10 when one team scores a goal, the other one will feel it's a mistake from some point of view. So, but if we're being honest and we are looking at all of the things that we can control, we're probably at the stage of the season where, the result will be the result. If we have a really good day and everything clicks and we go right and we earn a bit of luck, we can win. We can get something out of these games. But it's just making sure that we're controlling our controllables to finish the season with as much dignity as possible.
You mentioned the positives as well from those West Ham and Fulham games, and from my perspective, you probably contain the opposition quite well for the majority of those. How do you go about as a manager? Do you find it difficult to find that right balance of sort of being defensively solid and creating that attacking threat? It's
tough, and it is tough because the reality is that, and this isn't, this is meant we are a team that have been promoted from the Championship into the Premier League, and there is a difference in, athleticism across the board, how a team sustains performance in the Premier League, and we're not there. We're not down the line with that yet. So for us to get something out of these games, it has to be different. We have to find a different way. We've had to find a different way, and our way was, as we hoped against Fulham, very, very solid, very organised, and although we sunk deep in the second half, we got the game in a significant part of it where we wanted it to be. As is the West Ham game, where I thought we were unfortunate to go a goal down, and we wanted to be hard to beat and be solid, and the data pointed to that, and we get something out of the game. So that's what we have to be in these games. I don't think it can be any other way, and the last 34 games tells us that. So yeah, the balance of that is difficult, and and addressing the players aren't. Of course, it's only natural that their confidence is dented in a minute, and so I've got to take all of them things into consideration and come up with something which fits the bill on the day, and that's not easy.
Looking at sort of the players who've been out on loan for the last second half of the season, Shay Charles and Ronnie Edwards have been sort of fan favourites at their prospective loan clubs. Do they come back to train with you guys for the remaining bit of the season now their EFL campaign's done? No, not that I'm aware of. Again, they're probably decisions that are made from a different area of the football club than mine at the minute. So no, but at the minute there's no plan for them to return and train over the next couple of weeks. No. And when you look at when Matty Fernandez came off last week, I know there are really good reasons for that, of course. Is he sort of back to full fitness this week, and do you expect him to play a big role in the game against Man City this week? Yeah, look, and I touched on it last week. I was sad for everyone last week. That was my overriding feeling, and the frustrations of the supporters on the day. They've travelled, and I totally understand why they're disappointed. And the specific Matty Fernandez situation was, something which I can understand. When I sit back and look at it, and without the rational explanations, I can understand the frustration. I can, because he's a great lad, he's a great player, and he's been good for us.
So yeah, he's, you know, and as I touched on, I've got a great relationship with Matty, and he was absolutely fine with the call. Totally understood why. But yeah, he's recovered. He's trained well this week, and you know, hopefully he can go and put a really good performance in for us this Saturday.
Just lastly, you've had Ross Stewart playing at the top for the last few games now. What's the situation with Paul Anuachu? Is he still not fit to play?
No, Paul come on last week, didn't he?
Yeah, of course he did. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No, Paul come on. It's just, look, it's finding the balance of what we need, you know, in different moments of the game. We have a big squad, you know, and it's, I said last week, it's a hard part of the job, you know, finding the balance of getting, you know, keeping everyone alive and at it. And the nature of professional football is that you can't get everyone on the pitch and you can't get everyone on the bench. So, but you know, Paul, there isn't any issue of anyone who's, you know, we're all pulling in the right direction and making sure that the team comes first. So, you know, Paul's in contention to be involved on the day.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, George for 10
Just